You've prayed the same prayer 5 times tonight. You've quoted the verses. You've told yourself to trust God. But your heart is still pounding. Your thoughts won't stop. And somewhere underneath all of it is this quiet, crushing suspicion. Maybe the problem isn't your circumstances. Maybe the problem is you. Here is what the Bible actually says about anxiety. It is not a sin, it is a signal. And Philippians 4:6-7 contains a specific, sequential protocol, not a feeling to chase, but a set of actions to take that addresses anxiety at both the spiritual and biological level. That's what this video breaks down. Millions of Christians are walking around carrying real physical anxiety while simultaneously feeling guilty for having it. That combination, the anxiety plus the shame about the anxiety, is its own kind of suffering. And it gets worse. Every time someone tells you to just give it to God without explaining what that actually requires your body and your mind to do. The word the Bible uses for anxiety in Philippians 4:6 is the Greek word merimnao, and it means a mind being pulled in two opposing directions at the same time. Not weakness, not faithlessness, a divided attention. One part of your mind is trying to trust God. The other part is trying to manage every possible outcome on its own. That internal split is what produces the physical symptoms, the chest tightness, the racing thoughts, the 2 a.m. spiral that no amount of willpower seems to stop. So the question this video answers is not, why don't you have more faith? The question is, what does the Bible actually tell an anxious person to do, step by step, while their hands are still shaking? Because there is an answer. It is specific. It is sequential. And most Christians have read right past it. Let's start with what anxiety actually is. Not the clinical definition, not the cultural one, but the biblical one. Because the exact difference between fear and anxiety in Scripture is more specific than most people realize. Fear, in the Bible, is typically a response to something present and immediate, a threat in front of you. Anxiety, merimnao, is what happens when your mind travels forward in time and tries to carry a weight. That hasn't arrived yet, and may never arrive. You are not responding to what is. You are bracing for what might be. That distinction matters because Jesus addresses both, and he addresses them differently. In Matthew 6:25, he says, "Therefore I tell you, do not be anxious about your life." The word he uses there is the same root, merimnao, a divided mind. And then he doesn't just issue a command and move on. He builds a case. He points to birds. He points to wildflowers. Not as decoration, as evidence. Matthew 6:26 makes a logical argument. If God feeds creatures that cannot plant, harvest, or store food, then what does that say about how he views you? The argument isn't sentimental. It's a direct challenge to the assumption underneath your anxiety, the assumption that the outcome depends on your management of it. That assumption is the engine of merimnao. One half of your mind believes God is sovereign. The other half is quietly convinced that if you stop worrying, something will fall through the cracks. So your mind stays split. Your nervous system stays activated. And the peace that Paul describes in Philippians 4 stays just out of reach, not because it isn't available, but because the divided mind cannot receive it. Now look at 1 Peter 5:7. Peter writes, "Cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you." The word translated cast here is epiripto in the Greek, and it means to throw, not place gently, not hand over carefully, throw. The image is physical, deliberate, and complete. You are not meant to set your anxiety down nearby and keep one eye on it. The biblical instruction is to release it with intention, with force, and without retrieving it. The exact difference between casting and surrendering, as Christians typically use that word, is effort and finality. Surrender can feel passive. Casting is an act. It requires you to identify the specific thing you are holding, grip it consciously, and throw it in a specific direction. Vague prayers produce vague results. Specific petition, which is exactly what Philippians 4:6 requires, is what makes the transfer real. Here is the detail that stops most people cold when they first encounter it. In Gethsemane, the night before the crucifixion, Luke 22:44 records that Jesus was in such intense anguish that his sweat became like drops of blood. Doctors have a name for this condition. It's called hematidrosis, and it occurs when extreme psychological stress causes capillaries near the sweat glands to rupture. Jesus did not simply feel nervous. He experienced one of the most severe documented stress responses the human body is capable of producing, and he was the Son of God. Which means the next time anxiety makes you feel like a broken Christian, remember, the person who designed the protocol for peace needed it himself. So if Jesus himself experienced that level of physiological stress and still moved through it, the question becomes, how? What did he actually do in that garden that produced anything other than total collapse? Because he didn't suppress it. He didn't rebuke himself for feeling it. He named it out loud to his disciples. My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Matthew 26:38. He said that, directly, without apology. And then he prayed. Not a general prayer, a specific one. My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me. He named the exact thing he was dreading, brought it to the Father with precision, and then, and this is the part that tends to get skipped, he surrendered the outcome. Yet not as I will, but as you will. That sequence in Gethsemane is not incidental. It is the same architecture as Philippians 4:6-7, lived out under maximum pressure. Here's where the neuroscience enters, and it doesn't contradict the theology, it confirms it. When your brain perceives a threat, real or imagined, your amygdala fires and your body floods with cortisol, your heart rate climbs, your vision narrows, your prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for rational thought, for faith, for the ability to remember that God is sovereign, goes partially offline. This is why quoting a Bible verse mid-panic attack often feels like reading instructions in a language you barely speak. Your brain is not in a state that can receive it. That is not a spiritual failure. That is biology. And the Bible's protocol accounts for it. Here is what the research on gratitude and stress chemistry shows. The brain cannot physically process thanksgiving and panic at the same time. They occupy mutually exclusive neurological states. When you generate genuine gratitude, not performed positivity, but real specific acknowledgement of what God has already done, your brain begins producing a different chemistry. Cortisol drops. The prefrontal cortex re-engages. The amygdala's grip loosens. This is why Paul's instruction in Philippians 4:6 is not pray, then feel better. It is pray with thanksgiving. The thanksgiving is not an addition to the protocol. It is a biological switch built into the command. Ancient instruction, confirmed by modern neuroscience, written by a man in a Roman prison who had every material reason to be anxious and wasn't. Picture your stress response like a car dashboard, a single warning light on in the dark. Most people try to cover the light, some try to smash it. The biblical approach is different. You read it, you report it to the one who built the engine, and you trust that he can handle what you cannot see under the hood. The light doesn't mean the car is ruined, it means information is being communicated. Anxiety is that light, and the protocol gives you somewhere to take it. But here's the part nobody talks about. There is a gap, a real uncomfortable gap, between the moment you finish praying and the moment you actually feel peace. Your hands are still shaking, your chest is still tight. You said the words, you meant them, and the anxiety is still there. Most Christians assume that gap means the prayer didn't work. What if it means the guard hasn't arrived yet, but he's already on his way? Let's talk about that gap honestly. Because this is where most teaching on biblical anxiety loses people. Not in the theology, but in the distance between the theology and Tuesday morning. You know the verses, you've heard the sermons, you've journaled, prayed, repented, surrendered, and prayed again, and you are tired. Not spiritually lazy, not faithless, tired. You experience a specific kind of exhaustion when you try to believe your way out of a physical response. Your body creates these sensations faster than you can form thoughts. And the church has not always been honest about that. The instruction to just trust God is true, but delivered without context. It lands on an anxious person like a task they're already failing. One more thing they can't seem to get right. If that's where you are, this is worth saying directly. The anxiety you feel is not evidence that God has given up on you. It is not proof of weak faith, and it is not something you were supposed to have already defeated by now. The disciples fell asleep in Gethsemane. The night everything was on the line, they could not stay awake. Jesus didn't disqualify them. He found them, woke them, and kept moving. God is not standing at a distance waiting for you to get your emotions under control before he engages with you. The entire structure of Philippians 4:6 assumes you are anxious when you come to him. The instruction is not, once you feel better, pray. It is, bring the anxiety itself, all of it, into the conversation. The performance-based version of faith says, feel peace first, then God will be pleased with you. The biblical version says, come as you are, follow the protocol, and peace will be placed over you like a guard at a gate, not because you earned it, but because that is what the promise says will happen. Philippians 4:7. does not say peace might come. It says the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your heart and your mind. Will. Not might. Not could. Will. The gap between praying and feeling peace is not a verdict on your faith. It is the space where trust is actually formed. You handed something over. Now you wait, not passively, not anxiously checking to see if God received it, but with the specific, settled expectation that the one who made the promise has never once failed to keep it. Here is what we have not covered yet, and it changes everything about how long this actually takes. Because the protocol in Philippians 4 addresses what you do when anxiety arrives. But there is a deeper layer underneath chronic anxiety. The kind that keeps coming back even after you've prayed, even after you've applied every step. It operates at a level most Christians have never been taught to examine. Researchers studying epigenetics have found that prolonged stress chemistry doesn't just affect how you feel, it affects how your genes express themselves. Chronic anxiety is leaving a biological signature in your body. Scripture has a response to that too. One that goes further than a single prayer protocol, deeper than a moment of surrender, into something Paul calls the renewing of the mind in Romans 12:2. What that renewal actually requires, neurologically, spiritually, and practically, is not what most people think it is. Ready for your next step? Watch this video right here. Supporting us with a like and subscription allows us to keep producing this biblical content. Help spread the word by sharing this and leaving your thoughts in the comments. May the Lord bless you as you seek to grow in faith, walk in truth, and live in light.